All right, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed your lunch today. For anybody that wasn't here this morning, my name is Lindsay Warden, and I'm the Executive Director of Holstein Genetic Services for Holstein Association USA. I'm very pleased to be the moderator for the first of our two panels this afternoon for our robotics seminar. Over the next hour, you'll get to hear from a group of dairy farmers who have all worked with robotic milking systems for various amounts of time. I will introduce each of them and ask them to share about their operations and experiences. And then, after all three of them have had a chance to speak, we'll open the floor to some questions.
So this afternoon, I'd like to talk to you about making the change to robotic milking at the University of Connecticut. A little bit of background on the farm. The cows are milked 3 times a day in a De La Val double forward herringbone parlor with milk weights and ID beginning in 1991. And in 2013, with an upgrade, we also added the ability to detect blood and conductivity in the milking parlor. Our milking herd consists of 90 cows, 65 registered Holsteins, and 25 registered Jerseys, and we do participate in Holstein Complete and classify every 7 months. In spring of 2018, the university purchased 2 De La Val Classic VMS, 2 swinging cow brushes, the activity system, and a robotic feed pusher. On May 1st of 2018, we began the process and started to push cows through the robots once a day for grain. On May 15th, 2 weeks later, at 4 a.m., we milked the cows in the parlor for the last time, and at 10 a.m., started milking in the robots. And at that point, our parlor was decommissioned. Our treated cows are milked in a tie stall barn with bucket milker. We didn't run treated cows through the parlor, and we don't run them through the robots either. The addition to house the 2 robots was added at the end of the existing freestall barn. Freestall size is bigger on the north side of the barn, so second lactation and older Holsteins are housed there, and Jersey and first lactation Holsteins are housed on the south side. Our barn is free flow with no gates. There are one-way finger gates for each robot holding area to work with red cows that need to be fetched. And our barn's obviously a retrofit, which represents its own unique set of challenges. The biggest one being, I think, there's a narrow walkway behind the cows that are eating at the bunk and between there and the free stalls, so that can prevent a timid cow from going up through to the robot to be milked. We've also noticed that when the finger gates are down during fetch times, timid cows are reluctant to enter the commitment area if the boss cows are in there. A little bit about our cows. So as you might imagine in a university herd, these cows are handled a lot, and some of them are pets. They've all probably been shown once or twice by students in one of the 2 student shows we have on campus every year. Not necessarily always conducive to cows moving to the robot in a free flow system. So the Jerseys and the younger Holstein cows do really well moving to the robot in their own. Some older cows are fetch cows. That is what it is. And Chris Duffy is always quick to remind me when I get discouraged about that those cows probably will weed themselves out over the next few years and not to worry about it. And one of the more interesting things about the herd is it's no longer a herd mentality for the cows. When we were milking in the parlor, if you went into the pen to get a cow or 2 up, the other cows around them would get up to go with them. And we saw that change within the first 2 to 3 weeks after startup with the robots. Now you can walk out there, get a particular cow that you want to send to the robot, and she goes by herself, and none of the others around her feel compelled to do so. And the really nice part about with the robots is the cows in the barn are really quiet. So the transition to the robots was much easier for the cows than the people. It was a big change for people that had worked at the university for 30 years. And milked in a parlor 3 times a day to go to a free-flow robot, but we're working on it. And robots don't take the place of really good cow people. We still need good cow people to have their eyes on the cows when they're walking, to fetch cows and get fresh cows that we need to work with. And we also, grooming stalls is of utmost importance as far as milk quality goes. So we basically manage the free stall as a tie stall barn. When you're walking the pens to fetch cows, you groom the stalls at the same time. Anything that's wet or dirty comes off the back, fresh sawdust comes to the back of the stall. These cows will move better when left alone to do so, but if the people, if the farm staff wants to stand there and send 1 cow at a time to the robots, that's what they'll let you do. They'll stand there and wait for their human to come and send them, which defeats the purpose of the robot. So we had to work on that with the people a little bit. Service and support are really important to me. It's not my farm business, but I am responsible 24 hours a day. And we receive exceptional support from Hanfield Dairy Equipment and De La Val, and somebody always answers the phone if there's a problem. I can't even begin to tell you the support that and the help that Dr. Mike Brook at Kansas State has given me, from nutrition questions, and overall really good robot coach and helpful with troubleshooting along the way. We were not able to put up a new grain bin for the robot edition, so we're actually augering robot pellet from along quite a distance from the existing grain bin to the robot edition. So we found out very early on that pellet quality is critical, and the cows don't want to eat fines. So if we don't have a good pellet and there are a lot of fines, you can see visits drop, pellet intake drops, and then milk production drops. We've also found that starch levels in the PMR can't be really any higher than 22% in order for our cows to move to the robot. We do weekly dry matters on corn silage and adjust the ration accordingly. This is the monitor board from Delpro, and that will refresh if you hit the refresh button, so you get up to the minute information. This is a picture I took yesterday morning. So the 87 cows were at 90 pounds, and that includes the 21 jerseys that we're milking. You can see that the cows over here are eating 9.39 pounds of robot pellet a day and 2.66 visits per cow per day. As far as the things that we look at here, we get very detailed information on every cow: quarter milk yield, blood, conductivity, activity, low and high, low probably being the more important thing to find sick cows. Mastitis detection index, which takes into account intervals between milkings, increases in conductivity, increased kickoffs, or decreased yield in a quarter. Incomplete cows, again, cows that may be off on their milk or kicking, there may be a problem. Cows to motivate and cows to fetch. The nicest part for me is the alerts and notifications come to my phone instantly through the My Farm app within 2 to 3 seconds after the cow's exiting the robot. And I can look anytime through the app or log in through LogMeIn to check on things and see how things are going. From the robot touchscreens, the farm staff can look at incomplete cow lists, bring them back in the robot to be checked, check with a CMT paddle. When the students are there at night, I think it's good practice for them, and usually if they find a cow that's off on her milk, I usually have them temp her and do a physical so they get into the habit of doing so as part of their learning process. Herd Navigator is something that we started sampling with on September 1st of 2019. Herd Navigator is a biomodel sampling program which is complex and dynamic. There's 3 models involved: reproduction, mastitis, and ketosis. The consumable cost per cow per year is approximately $90. For the reproduction part is progesterone sampling, and any cows that are marked as culls will not be sampled. They start sampling at 20 days in milk and end at any point after that up to 320 days in milk. After calving, cows sampled for progesterone every 7 to 8 days. As the lactation evolves, time between samples is reduced, and when a cow reaches 50 days in milk, it will sample her every 3 days. Once progesterone levels reach 5 nanograms per mil, the model will know that the cow is cycling and should be in heat 8 to 12 days later, so sampling frequency increases. As soon as the progesterone drop is detected, a new sample will be taken at the next milking to accurately detect heat. And normally, it takes 15 samples per cycle. So after a heat alarm, the model will sample around day 5 and 9. If after day 9 progesterone values stay above 5 nanograms per mil, the model will assume a follicular cyst is developing, and then samples are taken every second day to monitor the cyst. I will tell you that Herd Navigator has been 100% accurate in detecting follicular cysts at Yukon. Prolonged anestrus cows are put on a cedar sink protocol. If progesterone is high at day 25, the luteal cyst risk will start increasing and cows will be placed on an alarm list. Off-sync cows will end up on this list. Herd Navigator doesn't particularly like off-sync, and that the hormone injections mess with the biomodel, because you're telling the cow to do things that Navigator thinks it shouldn't be doing right now, or changing the pattern from what the cow would normally be doing. So I stopped off-syncing any cows November 10th and have just been breeding exclusively off of natural heats. Our preg rate is up to 30, and and I have not had to cedar sink a cow yet for anestrus. The cows we're detecting both with visual heat and with herd navigator, but even some older cows that show no sign of visual heat have been bred and are confirmed pregnant with yesterday's herd check. As far as pregnancy goes, once a cow has been inseminated after a heat alarm, navigator will still sample for progesterone around day 5, 9, 14, and 18. At day 30, it will sample every 5 days. Around day 35, we'll issue a pregnancy alert and continue to sample every 5 days until day 55 to verify that the cow is still pregnant. If progesterone remains high, then it will stop sampling. Abortions. So if at any point between 35 and 55 days after insemination, the progesterone sample goes below 10 nanograms per mil, the system will ask for a sample at the next milking. If still low, the cow is placed on the abortion alarm list. So it's also been 100% accurate on this. 2 cows came up as aborting between day 35 and 55, and they were in fact checked open on the subsequent herd check. And if you see a pregnant cow acting like she's in heat, you just can go in and request a sample and see what's going on. Urea. The herd split into 4 groups. First lactation, day 14 to 140 day in milk, and then 141 to 300 days in milk. And then second lactation, the grouping is the same. Herd navigator will sample 4 random cows per group per day, and they're taken on these samples are taken on the first milking of the day. Individual group urea levels are calculated every day. Each value corresponds to a 4-day rolling herd average for the group. Results below 8.4 or above 14 alarm, and then you need to talk to your nutritionist about addressing the issues. Ketosis. So during the first 20 days when ketosis risk is highest, cows are sampled daily. After 20 days in milk, they're sampled every 4 days. If at any point BHB level increases suddenly, ketosis risk will increase, and the system will request a new sample at the next milking. Sudden milk drops will also cause the system to request a sample. When ketosis risk goes above the defined alarm threshold, the system will issue a ketosis alarm. Cows will be sampled every milking until the risk falls below alarm level, and then it will return to a normal sampling pattern. So when a cow initially alarms, maybe her risk percent is only 38 or 40. I don't run out and treat them right away. We typically will watch and see over the next 24 to 36 hours and see if the risk increases, and if her milk production drops, then obviously she needs to be treated. Sometimes they can fix themselves and move on and they don't need to be treated. So initially, probably I was a little anxious out of the gate and maybe treated a couple cows that we didn't need to treat for ketosis right away, but watch and see is okay. If obviously they alarm and the risk is very high, then they need to be checked out and they need to be treated. Mastitis. So during the first 30 days in milk, the cows will be sampled daily for LDH, and after that, sampled every 2.5 to 3 days. If at any point LDH level increases suddenly, mastitis risk will increase, and the system will request a new sample at the next milking. A sudden drop in milk or change in quarter conductivity will also trigger a sample. So our primary mastitis issue is with Klebsiella mastitis. So, and those cows for us fall into 2 distinct groups. One cow that's really sick and in declining health, and she needs us to intervene and follow our veterinary approved treatment protocols. Sometimes those things happen. Quarter conductivity will increase, but the cow's not off on her milk and she doesn't appear to be sick. And we found that self-curing in those types of cases actually works the best. So that's what we do. So it's a waiting and seeing and observing the cows and see what course of action we need to take.
Sorry, I don't have a PowerPoint prepared. I'm lucky to be here. We started up 5 weeks ago, so it's been kind of a whirlwind. I recommend not starting up the month of Christmas because when you have small children and trying to do robots, it's been a little crazy. So, yes, I was born and raised on a Holstein farm, registered Holstein. My mom knew the pedigree of every cow in the barn and instilled that in me. I went to college, decided to come back home, did Dairy Nutrition for a while, and then when I met my husband, we decided we were going to farm together. So at that time, his dad was only milking about 60 cows. So with the addition of my parents' herd, we were milking about 135 in a flat barn parlor, like a step-up 6. So it took a long time to milk 135 cows in that barn, that parlor, probably like 4.5 hours, both ends of the day. So right there, and you had to have two people the way our barn was set up. We had 2 pens, so you had to bring each pen in separately, so you had to have 2 people all the time. But over time, we added a few more cows and a few more cows, and we had hired Hispanic laborers, and that was really great for a period of time, and then that wasn't really great for towards the end of that. And then, trying to find American labor is difficult. Nobody wants to milk cows, except me, I guess. I miss milking the cows, honestly. So as our herd grew, we started having kids, and you start thinking about, well, where are we going to be in 20 years? So originally, we had built our pre-fresh barn in 2009, the year my first son was born, to become our parlor. And the milk industry just never came back to what it was, so we were never able to actually get that plan off the ground. So we just kept hiring more people and just kept on milking. So we got to about 190 in that Step Up 6 in January 2 years ago, almost to the day. And it was like -20 on one Saturday night, and the agitator on the tank broke, and we had so many issues, and our herdsman quit. So we were kind of like, oh, where do we go now? We had already been thinking about robots, but we hadn't quite, made the jump. So we decided after he quit that we needed to cut down our herd size because we were overcrowded, and we were probably going to make more milk on less cows. So unfortunately, a couple months later, my husband was in a serious car accident, and that really made us cut down. So we cut down to probably about 140 milking. And we stayed there, and we had intentions of going back to 240 and put in a 4-robot system. We were hoping to put it in Greenfield, Mass., which is like 6 miles south of where our current farm is, but it's where all of our corn land is. So it kind of made sense, have the cows near where the corn is. Unfortunately, to build a brand new facility with 4 robots, we were looking at $2 million. So the bank said no. and Greenfield actually wasn't as ag-friendly as we had hoped, because they were going to charge us about $20,000 for the building permit, and that just seemed ridiculous just to start like that. So we kind of came back and said, well, what do we love? We love our cows. What can we do good at? We can do better with our cows if they were less crowded. So we went back to the drawing board. We had built a 4-row barn in 2004, and that housed about 60 cows. We usually had about 80 in it, even though we only had the 60 stalls. But it was a feed alley down the middle, so we had 2 sides. So we said, well, we can retrofit this barn. So we added onto the front of the barn. We started that addition in August of 2018, actually, and we were working through Farm Credit to get our loan, and they said, oh, well, if you get an FSA guarantee, then you'll have a reduced interest rate, and that'll save you $20,000 a year. So we thought, well, that's worth it. Unfortunately, when we signed the paperwork, it was right when the government shut down, and they stopped working on loans for a month, and then they stopped working on loans for another new loans for another month. So our funding was what held up our project. So our robots arrived on April 15th, 2019, and we started up on December 10th, 2019. So we had a long road because we had contractors lined up to do the work early spring, and of course they had to take other jobs when it didn't go through. But so with all that said, there is so much to starting up with robots, especially if you're doing a retrofit, because you're not just starting from scratch. You're making sure that, we actually had to build a new milk house because our old milk house was too far away from the barn. We put in a new tank, new office, new utility room, all of that stuff. Right now we're milking about 100 cows, and like I said, we're 5 weeks in, and we've come up probably 15 pounds in the first 3 weeks, and now we're up another 5 pounds or so. So we're averaging about 87 pounds a cow, because we were only averaging maybe 65 before, but we had cut back on grain because of expenses and whatnot, because we weren't getting the milk. Why keep putting in grain if they're not going to make the milk? So it's really exciting to see what they can do now. I don't have any doubt that we can get to over 90 pounds. We always thought, well, maybe 130 cows on a robot, on 2 robots, might be where it's at. But if the cows are already doing this well, maybe we can do better with less cows. So we are complete members as well. I'm the registered Holstein person in our family, and we also have some Brown Swiss as well that are registered. But keeping those records are so important to me. I can trace back my son's first registered show calf actually traced back to my first registered show calf. So I thought that was really cool to have it still, in the family. But keeping those records has been important to me. We haven't been on test just because an extra couple $100 a month wasn't worth it at the time, because our old parlor, we did have milk weights, but that's all we had. We didn't have any other information. Moving to the robots from where we were as a cow person is just so incredible, the information that you can get. The transponder has activity on it, and rumination. I mean, the rumination is amazing, because you can see a cow off feed, before she even knows it practically. So we've used that tool quite a bit, and you can, there's graphs and whatnot that you can see every single cow. You can see how they're coming up in milk when they calve. We had a cow that calved the day after startup, and she hit 171 pounds, so that was a high for us so far, so we were pretty excited about that. It's hard to go from the herd mentality to the individual cow mentality. And like Mary Margaret was saying about the employees going from chores, we're always at 5 a.m. to do this, this, and this, and now what do? So we're still only 5 weeks in, so we still have extra labor, but we're still trying to figure out, where do we go with this labor? Do we just, get rid of people? There's a couple of our employees that are planning on leaving anyway, so it works out, but you shouldn't be pushing cows all the time. The whole the whole beauty of this program is that they're going to learn on their own, and eventually, you still have to be in the barn, obviously, but it's really cool to see. So it took my husband a long time to convince me to go this way, because I'm definitely a cow person. I want to be out there in the barn all the time with the cows, and now you can manage your cows better without managing employees. I'm still walking around the barn checking for discharges and checking for heats, because the robot isn't 100% on everything. So I was feeding calves about a week ago, and I got an alert on my phone, which is great, getting alerts that 9:49 Nifty was in heat. Well, Nifty was in the calving pen. So when I went in there, she had just calved, obviously. So she was super active. She was running around with her calf. I mean, they were really acting crazy, but the robot knows that she's active, but the alert said she's 281 days pregnant. Well, obviously she's not in heat, she calved. So, but it's helping me get heifers pregnant, putting collars on heifers, because you're not around the heifers as much as you are the cows. So putting collars on the heifers, you can get their activity level. And I still like to make sure that they're in heat, before we just breed them. So we're still looking for clear discharge and standing and whatnot. But it does tell you a lot more information than you have. So service and support is very important. We had an issue with a pulsator at 2 a.m, and they had to come out and change it. And they do. So it's good to make sure you have a good relationship with your dealer, and that they'll work for you as well. So 5 weeks in, I'm excited what the future holds for us, because we're only milking 100 right now. We dried off quite a few early, because the later lactation cows don't conform very easily. The ones that have freshened since we started are doing really wonderful. They're coming in on their own. It's great to see that they're coming in at 2 a.m. when that there's nobody in the barn pushing them at that time. We also get somatic cell on our robots, which is cool, because if you have a high cow, and if it's just a flare-up, we can treat cows, and the robot will wash the system after you have milked that cow automatically, which is nice, because we don't have the ability to milk in our old facility. It's still there, but it's dormant. It needed a lot of work before we switched to robots, and it was on its last leg, and it needs to be retired. So, but make sure you treat the robot before you treat the cow. So I'm sure you've heard that before. You don't want to send any hot milk, but yeah, it's changed the way we do everything, and And I work off the farm full-time, so I'm able to still keep my herd manager role, and I can keep track of every single cow just by my phone. I have the app that sends me signals, or I can just log in and see any cow or look at trends or whatnot. So
To begin, I will talk a little bit about how our decision-making came to unfold. So to begin, I have to take you back to 1950. And no, I was not alive back then. So my great-grandfather was actually a Guernsey guy back in 1950. And in 51, my grandfather came home with the first Holstein. And that was the first squabble in the family. You're going to notice as each generation takes over, there's going to be some decision process that causes some kind of squabble. So in 56, my grandfather formed the bow ankle prefix. I get questions on that all the time about what it stands for. It's actually the year my father was born, and it stands for Bruce Osborne, Anna Osborne, and Clayton Osborne, who are my grandparents. In 68, they used to milk in a 12-stall tie stall. That barn burned in 62. The herd got sold, and then there was 4 calves purchased from Winchell Mountain Farms. And we still can trace back families, cows in our barn today that go back to those 4 calves. In 68, we started testing with the IHA. Our Elton Tibbetts was our tester back then, and he was one of the last guys to actually test the butterfat on the farm in his car. 76, we started classifying. We were always registered, but in 76, we started classifying, and then 77, we joined Yankee Milk, which later became Agrimark. In 77, the barn down back in Somers got built, and we expanded the herd to 24 cows. Followed by, in 1990, we moved the farm to Sharon Springs, and that was my father and uncle's decision, so that was the second squabble in the family. We were the second to last dairy down in Westchester County, the last one being Hilltop Hanover, which Dave Younger was a big influence on my family's with the registered Holsteins. The transition to robots. When I was at Cornell University from 2007 to 2011, I met one of my closest friends and one of the most influential people in my life, Clayton Heminger of Hemdale Farms in Seneca Castle. Through those 4 years together and beyond, he introduced me to the robotic milking systems, and we were up at his farm numerous times throughout our college tenure. When I graduated in 2011, we talked about robots, but at the time they were unpractical, and my father and uncle just laughed. But as time went on, the robots started to intrigue my father and uncle. And in 2015, Lely, Vermont finally put a branch down in Greenwich, New York. And everything started to roll from there. Now, I know on the slideshow it looks like a Lely brochure with all the decision-making that went into this process, but it really is true that every aspect of how you handle the cows, your life, the way you manage the herd changes. So the biggest thing was we didn't want to lose our identity, but we knew we couldn't stay the same. And we didn't want to go to a freestall with a parlor, so robots were the natural choice. And then on June 13th, 2017, after 6 years of planning, we finally started milking robots. And I know that's weird that I remember the date, but it gets ingrained in your mind the day you start milking.
It does.
And so we put 2 Lely robots in. Well, we started with the one, milking the 60 cows out of there, and then we put the second one in March of 2018. When we first went over, our 2 main concerns being registered were classifying and testing. The classifying we're still learning, because going from a tie stall to a free stall and trying to figure out how to classify the cows is a bit of a challenge for us, but we are progressing. The second thing is the testing. We were testing, as I said, with DHAA. So we began testing in 2018 on TriStar. We were doing DHAA, and it was kind of cumbersome. They would bring in their shuttle. We'd have to hook it up to the robot, and then the tester would leave, and we were in charge of everything, making sure all the samples got taken correctly. Occasionally it would miss, and just some drawbacks to that system. At first we thought we were going to save money on the system because with the tester, when you're in the tie stall testing, the tester is there the whole time, going down the list, marking the cows. We figured with the computer generating the reports, the tester would just print off the reports and be done with it, but that wasn't the case. We actually went up in our costs with testing. So we first heard of the TriStar program in the Pulse. So through some inquiring, that's when I first met Bill on a lengthy phone call out in California. The transition was very simple. I got in touch with Lisa out of their office, signed a waiver, all the information went over, and we haven't looked back since. Once a month, Lisa contacts me through email. I just copy and paste our tank weights from Agmark, and that goes right back, and it's a 20-second thing to do. It's super simple. You don't have to screw around with a shuttle in the milking in the robot room. One of the concerns with our previous testing was, for some reason, our pedigree, our production records weren't making it on the pedigree. So through this system, since ATA, Agritech Analysis, is paired with Holstein Associated, it made it so much simpler to upload everything onto our pedigrees. Through this program, I truly believe that the data is more accurate. As I said, the program takes everything off the computer, which when we first started with robots, we're like, all right, we have all this data coming from these computers, and we can't use it on the pedigrees. So through switching everything from our computers that we generate on the farm, which I think is more accurate, makes it onto the pedigrees. With these reports that are generated, we can compare our individual cows to the rest of the herd. We get better genetic evaluations on them. We use it for culling reasons, breeding purposes, and the program is much more economical as one test, or the full year of testing with ATA is even less than 1 month of testing with our previous program. So this is where we are today. The transition from a tie stall herd to a robotic dairy was a very large undertaking for my family. But we didn't want to lose our identity being registered. I feel that the transition went well. And with programs such as TriStar AMR, it made it so much simpler and much more sense than staying with our current program. When you first move to robots, there's just so much coming at you. And it's overwhelming, and then finally, as time goes on and things settle down, you finally can start pulling out the information, the most important information. They're so sensitive, the data. We'll notice, like, during the summer when you get a cold front coming through, the next day after the cold front with the change in the barometric pressure, the cows will be off 5 pounds. And it used to drive me nuts. It still drives my uncle nuts. Seeing that drop, he goes, "Oh my God, what happened?" But I'm like, all right, give it a day, they'll be back up.
I agree with the collars, just the information we get from the collars, the activity, the rumination. I was really happy that we had that information. And the semantic cell add-on that we did on ours has been really helpful for our herd. But like Brad said, all of the data coming to you at once right now, that's where I am. So I'm like, wow, I just love all of this. I mean, I was talking to our vet the other day at Herd Check that, that we're we're just watching it all the time on our phones. And he's like, so you're not addicted to social media, you're addicted to your robots. I'm like, well,
Yes.
kind of, but it's just so exciting that, you know, you have this potential in your herd, and now we're getting to see that. So, and having all this extra data, you know, you don't have to do as much work to get the information that you need. So, you know someone's in heat because it told you, so.
I think for me, the thing that I appreciate the most is finding the sick cows much more quickly than we used to in the parlor. Like I said, it comes to my phone within 2 or 3 seconds, and since I was at a decided disadvantage before because I rarely got to milk the cows, which, like you, I like to milk cows. So then it was a matter of trying to chase people down after the fact, and if the milker forgot to tell you what was going on, then it became a bigger problem than it needed it to be. And now we're finding, whether it's mastitis or ketosis or a lameness issue, you find it so quickly that it can be dealt with before it becomes a bigger problem. So we try to use bulls that are robot ready, but still with a decided consideration to type, because we're a registered herd and I like pretty cows. And but they also need to make milk, so that's, you know, we've always bred, and we also use the health, I use the health trait indexes when selecting bulls. I really watch DPR, and those are the considerations that I use.
Yes, I also like to milk pretty cows. So I've always wanted, you know, sound feet and legs. Udder depth is always an important one. With the robots, you know, those rear teat placement is super important. I had started breeding robot-ready bulls into the herd probably 3 or 4 years ago, even though I hadn't been convinced about using them. But and I also have been breeding using only A2 bulls. But now with the robots, we are noticing that there are a couple of rear teats that are too close, so we may have to call on that aspect. But definitely bulls that you know, provide a square or udder is better for them.
I agree with that. With the udder characteristics, we look at that much more closely now. We always built our herd around type bulls. Kind of changed a little bit. We still try and keep the good sized frame cows in the herd. We did switch to all genomics, young sires now, which is another aspect of the herd that changed over the last few years, because it was all proven bulls before this, and now I think we're 100% young sires. So.
The hardest thing, especially where it's still kind of new, is a lot of bankers look at debt per cow, and you can't with robots because it's way off the charts. So you really have to show them what you can do performance-wise and how you can make up that debt per cow, and how, you know, your 10-year plan, how you're going to make it through the really tough times, you know, when you're still paying everything off. So that was a big challenge for us and for our lender.
So for us, even though it was a university project, there were, you know, funding concerns, obviously. And for us, it was a 2-component. We also were struggling with keeping ag worker help. And all of us know that ours is not a 5-day-a-week, 8 to 4, and people really want that. So for us, it was convincing the university that we could do with 2 less farm staff if we put the robots in, which we have. 1 person left and 1 person retired, and those positions were gone due to attrition. They were not replaced. And we're now, because like Angie said, you have people, you know, you have this help still, some help. So we've been cross-training and using folks at other, not necessarily the dairy, but the dairy folks will help on the crop side, and they'll also help at livestock and poultry, and vice versa. Some of the crops guys in the wintertime will fill in at the dairy barn when they're not making feed. And the second component for us was obviously the data generating component of it for research projects and for the students for teaching.
So I like to talk about labor also, but it's just my uncle and I in the beginning. So one of the big things with lately, with this bunch of seminars we attended at Empire Farm Days and all, they're like, oh, you're going to save this much labor. Well, it's my uncle and I now, and it's going to be my uncle and I afterwards. So I mean, it's not a number we can put into perspective for us. I fell into something very nice. The mortgage was all paid off by the time I came home. So I fell into a clean slate. One of the things we talked about with the banker, and they're right. I mean, taking on debt for a robot is huge. I mean, it's a huge number, but with the environment you're creating with the robot, I think it's worth it. Like I said, all the bullet points from labor, increased production with the cows' well-being, and then your lifestyle. I mean, we were in the barn 3:30 in the morning, and then finishing at 6 o'clock at night. And it's nice on Christmas Day where you're done at, go out, be done at 4 o'clock, enjoy a nice evening on Christmas, and it's just so much different and nicer that you can't it's hard to put a value on that.
I actually meant to mention this earlier, but I was nervous and I forgot. So some of our future plans are, if things continue to go in the direction that they're going in with Herd Navigator and Repro, we plan to actually put our activity system down at the heifer barn and use that on the heifers where we're not there as often, to try to improve the reproductive performance there. And we have this nice old holding area from the parlor that actually abuts to the north side of the robot, and I could get more stalls in there for some bigger mature cows and milk a few more cows on the robot on the high producing side. So those are my plans short term.
We're still actually in the middle of adding on to the existing freestall barn. So we're going to eventually have 120 cows in this barn, but it's still only made for like 80 cows. So we're adding on to that barn, and we're going to be putting in the Discoveries, which is the vacuum robot. I'm really excited. I'm going to name them Roomba and Squeegee. So they basically vacuum up. They have a bladder inside. They vacuum up the manure, and then they go over to a slaughter floor and dump the manure, and then go back. So right now, a lot of robot barns end up doing alley scrapers or something like that. But we live on a very high hill, and it gets cold, and everything freezes. We didn't want to deal with broken chains and anything. So right now we are not manually, but with the skid steer, we're scraping the barn twice a day. So we feel that once the addition is done and the cows have more room and we're not interrupting them as much, they'll be even more productive. So we're excited about that. Something I'd like to see on the robot is maybe somatic cell on each quarter. I mean, we do get electrical conductivity on each quarter, but the somatic cell is just on the the entire milk that she's made for that milking. So that's something that maybe is down the road. I'm not sure, but I don't know. We did go with the A5 instead of getting the A4, and we've seen lots of improvements in just the A5 versus the previous model. So I mean, we're pretty happy 5 weeks in. So, but I'm looking forward to no more projects for a long time.
So I'm so glad that I'm not the only one that names the robots, because ours is Knight Rider and Jarvis. We are looking at the somatic cell. We don't have it in currently. That's a big thing in the next year or so. Long term, I consider the vector system with Laley, and with the way the milk industry going, I truly believe everything's going to be kind of a niche thing where name brands are going to rule the marketplace, and that's something that Laley has out there, but not in the marketplace yet, is the Laley Orbiter. And so, if you're listening out there, Laley, we want in the Northeast.
So Brad, for folks in the audience that aren't as familiar with Laley's products, the Orbiter would be?
So it's a completely automatic milk processing plant that you put right on the farm. There's one in the Netherlands right now, and I think that's the only one out there.
I would say spend some time, visit some farms, and don't just go to one. Go to 3 or 4 of each brand and check things out and talk to people and do your homework. And because it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. You have to see what's going to work for your cows, your help, and your family. and what kind of commitment you want to make to that.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is do your homework. We started looking at robots at least 4 years before we actually put them in, and look at both brands, or however many brands there are out there now. Go to as many farms as you can, especially close to your area, just so that they have similar feeding and whatnot. I mean, we went to Pennsylvania and visited some, but they feed a lot differently than we feed. They feed concentrate and pellets, and we usually do TMRs up here. So do your homework on that, and also have a really good support system in place, especially if you have small children when you're starting up, because nobody wants to have to find a babysitter to watch your kids from midnight to 4 a.m. if you both want to be at the barn.
I agree with that. As I said, it's 6 years. We spent 6 years planning this, and from visiting dairies to what Clay taught me, there's no stone you can't turn over and find some new ideas somewhere. I know ideas in Canada are different from down here, so don't just limit yourself to the Northeast or the U.S. I mean, to go to Germany, Canada, wherever there's robots, because everywhere has different ideas. And with this, I'm a big believer in the technology. This is kind of a, right now it's an older person's game, but I truly believe that with this technology and the robots, that it really will entice younger people to come back to the industry.